He looked at me, then at the woman sitting next to him, smirked and said, "You should be thankful that I finally chose the truth. You were never enough for me." I can't remember how I breathed after that sentence. Everything around me, the sound of the waiter, the clinking of glasses, the fragrant smell of roasted coffee, suddenly disappeared. The world shrank to just 3 people: him, that strange woman, and me, Avery Johnson, who had just been humiliated by my husband in a cold public place. That coffee shop was where he had promised me so many things, where I had cried tears of happiness when he proposed with a small ring that he said he had saved all summer to buy. It turned out that in just 8 years, yes, 8 years, all the memories could be thrown back in my face like a slap. Not with my hands, but with words that completely denied everything I had ever believed in, ever sacrificed. I used to be a potential editor in New York, but I gave it all up, moved to Boston to build a home, as he called it. I became the woman who always came after him, supported all his legal campaigns, was the shoulder for him to lean on when he lost a lawsuit, was the one who cooked every warm dinner he often forgot because he had to work the night shift. But it turned out, I was just the background. A background that fit the success story he wrote for himself, where I had no main role, no lines, only responsibility and invisible sacrifice. I sat there, not bowing my head, not asking him to come back. I looked straight into his eyes, not to hold on, but to engrave this moment in my heart, as a milestone, not to remember him, but to remember how much I had suffered, and how I would never be the same again. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. Maybe because I had exhausted all expectations. Maybe because I knew, from that moment on, I would no longer live in his story. I would rewrite my life the way I deserved. And that's when I started to remember all the signs I had missed. If you've also been underestimated, been considered not good enough, share your story with Avery in the comments section. Don't forget to follow the BS-FamiFiles channel so you don't miss out on stories that make you look back at yourself. UOAG. I used to think that his silence was due to work pressure, that the phone calls were turned off, the late nights, or the shirt with a strange perfume smell were small things. I was the one who always tried to understand, maybe because I was afraid of losing, or maybe because I was so used to enduring that I forgot that I also deserved to be loved. One time, in the winter of our 3rd year together, he came home around midnight, entering the apartment smelling of alcohol and a strange scent. Not the scent I used, nor the scent I saw him wearing in the bathroom. He said briefly, "Party with partners, too tense, so had a few drinks." I smiled awkwardly, packed his coat for him as usual, then went into the kitchen to get him a glass of warm water. When I turned around, I was in tears. But I didn't let him see. I told myself, "It's just a party. Don't overthink it. Don't be selfish." But that wasn't the first time. And of course, not the last time. How many times have I sat alone in the small kitchen, setting out 2 meals as usual, lighting candles, playing soft music, waiting. When the clock struck 10:30, I would clear the cold table, pack the food in the refrigerator, and sit alone in front of a glass of wine. I learned to make excuses for his absence. That he was busy, that men needed space, that if I did better, he would go back to being the husband I loved. And strangely enough, I believed it, for years. Aunt Joni was the only person who saw me more clearly than I did. She came to visit one Saturday afternoon when he was in a meeting. I brought out apple pie, her favorite, and the one I had spent a week learning to make exactly as my mother had made it. But she just looked at me, not touching the pie, and asked softly, "Do you ever see yourself smiling again, Avery?" I froze. A seemingly gentle question, but like a knife cutting into the softest part of my heart. I didn't answer, because deep down, I knew the answer was no. Not because I didn't know how to smile, but because I had forgotten how to do it for myself. I used to be a woman who loved the morning sun, who bought flowers to arrange every weekend. I used to plan to write a book, and dreamed of a small bookstore by the river. But after marrying him, I put everything aside. Every time I mentioned my dream, he said, "It's not the right time. You should focus on your family, and let me take care of your career." So I chose to stay home, support, quietly. I took care of every bill, arranged every medical appointment, and took care of his parents like my own children. I don't regret those things, but I regret letting myself slip away from myself in silence. The initial cracks became deep holes when I discovered he had set a password on his phone. Not because I liked to check, but because the change in him was so obvious. He stopped hugging me every morning, stopped asking me, "Did you sleep well?" Stopped touching my hand lightly when passing the kitchen. What replaced it was a cold distance. A physical presence but a complete absence of spirit. I remember one evening, I prepared his favorite dish, baked lasagna. I set the table on the balcony, lit a small lamp, poured the same wine he had praised during our trip to Napa Valley. He came back, glanced at the table, then quietly walked into the bedroom, without a word. I followed him, asking quietly, "You're not eating? I cooked this afternoon." He frowned, not bothering to turn around. "You're so free, you have time to cook these things. I'm tired, don't make a big deal out of it." At that time, I wasn't angry. I apologized to him. I said, "I just wanted to make you happy." But when I went into the kitchen, looked at the steaming food, I laughed bitterly. I called Aunt Joni that night. She didn't say much, just said, "You're dying in a house full of lights, Avery." I knew she was right, but I wasn't brave enough to face it. I still deluded myself that, if I just be patient a little longer, he will realize my worth. I was wrong. The truth is, people never realize the value of what they think is always available, especially when that thing doesn't know how to resist, doesn't know how to let go. I lost myself in that love, lost to the point that I no longer recognized who the woman in the mirror was. Every morning when I woke up, I no longer took care of myself. Wearing only comfortable clothes, hair tied loosely, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. He didn't notice, didn't ask if I was okay, didn't realize that the woman who loved him with all she had was slowly withering away day by day. The cruelest thing is not the final betrayal, but the indifference that lasts day by day and month by month, making people doubt their own worth. I began to believe that maybe I really wasn't good enough, not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not anything. It wasn't until that noon at the coffee shop, where he dropped his last sentence like a knife, that I understood. The problem was never me, it was him. It was the deception disguised as superficial apologies. And for the first time in many years, I felt my heart was calm. No longer pounding with pain, no longer tightening with anger, but a moment of silence, proud, as if my soul had just escaped a box that had been sealed for a decade. I stood up, left the bar, didn't look back, didn't cry, and didn't need anyone to chase after me. I had forgiven him for the phone being turned off, for the nights he didn't come home, for the lipstick smudges on his collar that he said were probably from a coworker hugging me when he congratulated me on my promotion. But that email was undeniable. It was a clean, direct cut into the shell of trust I had patched up over the years. One ordinary Monday morning, I checked my inbox while waiting for the water to boil for my coffee. An email titled, "Confirm your stay, W Hotel Miami" popped up in our shared inbox. The email we used to book flights, buy things for the house, and share itineraries. I opened it. My hands went cold as I read the words. Guest name, Samantha G. Lewis. Check-in, Friday, 9:30 p.m. Check-out, Sunday, 11 a.m. Room, Ocean View Suite, king bed. I was speechless. Not because the name was unfamiliar, but because it wasn't unfamiliar. Samantha, his coworker, had appeared at my Christmas party last year. I remember her wearing a bright red dress, smiling widely but with cold eyes. I remember it clearly because at that moment, I caught the look they exchanged when no one was looking. A look too intimate, too understanding. But I had quelled that doubt by reassuring myself. I was being unreasonably jealous. Now, I just felt stupid. I didn't rush. I didn't make a scene. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone like in the movies. I just put down my coffee cup, sat down, and turned on my computer. I looked up each of his credit card bills for the past 3 months. I compared them to what he said every time he went on a business trip. The names of the hotels, the restaurants, even the gift shops, all of them matched his work schedule with a terrifying perfection. Only, they didn't match mine. Not a single line about spending money on his wife. Not a single small gesture that he remembered me on those trips. Just traces of another life, another woman, another relationship, one I didn't know I was outside of. The nights I stayed up waiting for him, where was he? The mornings I woke up early to make breakfast, what was he doing? I started taking notes. Every day, every location. I saved all the emails, printed out the receipts, took pictures of the ambiguous messages. I created a separate folder on my computer. I called it Clarity, because for me this wasn't hatred, this was sanity. A week later, on Friday, I told him I was going to Aunt Joni's to help fix the porch. He nodded without doubt and asked me, "Come back early, we'll have dinner this weekend." I smiled. Of course. In fact, I rented a car, and I followed him, as quietly as he had walked out of the marriage. I don't know what I expected. A lie? A sudden turn? A proof that I was wrong? But no. He drove straight to a high-rise apartment building in Cambridge. I stopped a few dozen meters away, turned off the lights, and looked through the windshield like a character in a detective movie. It was the first time I had done something so out of character. And also the first time I saw the whole truth so naked. He got in. The door opened. She, Samantha, appeared in his shirt, her wet hair hanging over her shoulders, barefoot, smiling as if she had just woken up in the arms of the man she loved. They hugged. I didn't turn away. I didn't cry. I just gripped the steering wheel. Inside me, everything was silent. There was nothing left to break, because everything had been broken for a long time. It's just that now, I saw the end with my own eyes. That night, I didn't go home. I went to Aunt Joni's house for real. She didn't ask much. I just gave her the USB containing all the evidence and said, "I think I'm ready." She looked at me for a long time, then said softly, "You see clearly now, right?" I nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I felt relieved. Not because he betrayed me, but because I no longer had to defend myself for him. 2 days later, I returned home as usual. He was still the man who was extremely good at disguising himself. He kissed my forehead and asked, "Did you have a good weekend at Auntie's?" I smiled, not answering. I sat down at the dining table, watching him chew on the pasta I cooked, the dish he used to say was bland, and found him strange. It was as if I were having dinner with a stranger I knew all too well. That night, while he slept, I cleaned out the closet, packed my things. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need to make a scene, I just left. But before I left, I placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside were the divorce papers, and a printout of a security camera in front of Samantha's apartment building where I had taken the two of them hugging. Underneath, I wrote a line in black neatly and clearly. "You never saw me. You only saw the version of me you needed, the meek, the quiet, the forgiving. But I died with that pretense. I wish you happiness in your truth." The next morning, I left the house in the fog. I didn't bring much, just a suitcase and the last of my pride. I didn't look back. No necessary anymore. And perhaps, what you never expected is, I don't need your apology. I just need you to know that you have lost something that money, power, or any woman can't replace. I used to think that leaving someone you had been with for nearly a decade was the hardest part. But no, leaving was the easy part. The hardest part was daring to accept that you had been deceived, and still being sober enough not to let anger turn into something that distorted you. I didn't destroy things. I didn't post long statuses on social media. I didn't call his family to denounce or make a fuss. I kept quiet, but it was the kind of silence that made others wary. I hired a lawyer, not an acquaintance, but one of the most cold and unforgiving in the divorce field. I told her the whole story. No crying, no hesitation. Just a clear summary, with evidence, with reasons, and with determination. We'll do it quickly, neatly, and thoroughly, she said. I nodded. I don't want revenge. I just want to get back what's rightfully mine, including my life. I transferred all my savings, the money I had personally managed since the early years of our marriage, to a separate account in my name. I withdrew from co-ownership of the house where I had chosen every curtain, every picture frame, every tile in the kitchen, but which I no longer needed. I had struggled to build a home with someone who did not value it. And then, I chose a date to file for divorce. Not a random date. It was his birthday. I left the cream-colored envelope in the middle of the kitchen table where I'd placed the birthday cake, written the handwritten cards, and cooked his favorite meals every year. Inside, in addition to the divorce papers, was a small handwritten note. I am not the problem. I am the answer you never deserved. I didn't wait for a response. I blocked his number, deleted all the photos from my phone. Taking the wedding ring off my finger and dropping it into a glass of red wine at night, a last poetic farewell I allowed myself to a dead marriage. Karma. Something people think is vague, but I saw it coming very quickly. A week later, Aunt Joni got a call from an old friend, now a supervisor at the company where he worked. They said that the HR department had just started investigating an unhealthy relationship between him and Samantha. The reason was that someone anonymously sent an email with photos and check-in history of the two of them. In Miami. I didn't send it. But I know who did. Cody, his old co-worker, who had talked to me a few times at company parties. Cody was perceptive. He also didn't like men like him. Good at talking morally, but living a double life. Samantha was forced to leave for violating the company's ethics and conflict of interest regulations. He was suspended pending investigation. And in the legal profession, a stain on ethical conduct is almost impossible to erase. He called Aunt Joni. He said he wanted to see Avery, talk to her one last time. All she said was, "She's not here anymore, and she doesn't need to hear from you anymore." What I did next wasn't to confront her, it was to leave. Aunt Joni took me out of the sitch-out of what had once been my home, now a wall of heartache. "We'll start over, honey," she said as we turned onto the freeway that led to the Portland suburbs. "Somewhere where you don't have to apologize for being true to your heart." And I believed her. I rented a small apartment near the beach where I could hear the waves in the morning and smell the salt in the wind in the evening. I started working remotely as an editor, taking on small projects from publishers. From someone who used to stay in bed all morning because of emptiness, I started waking up early, doing yoga, cooking, reading, things that used to seem like luxuries. I didn't pretend to be okay. I became okay. A few months later, I ran into Cody again at a literary conference in Boston when I was visiting old friends. He smiled and said, "I knew it from the start. You're not as weak as you think." I laughed, softly but firmly. I was never weak. I just forgot my strength. Rumors about him and Samantha spread quickly. His professional social media, once a place to brag about his legal victories, went silent. No more updates. No more interactions. I heard Samantha moved to Florida. He moved back in with his mother. And he still hasn't found a new job because his reputation has been tainted. And me? I write again. About women who thought they were the problem, but were actually the answer. I get emails from strangers, thanking me for helping them leave toxic relationships. I'm not vengeful. I don't need it. Because nothing hurts more than seeing someone who once looked down on you, happy without them. I no longer live for approval. I live to see myself shine when I look in the mirror. And I say to myself, you thought I was broken, but you forgot. What's broken, when put back together properly, can become something much more beautiful. Portland welcomed me with a light rain in early March, cold enough to chill the heart but clear enough to smell the rebirth of the trees. I rented a small apartment near the hills, where every morning I could hear the birds singing and see the sunlight filtering through the windows. I began to live a life where no one else was deciding for me. I took a freelance editing job for a children's book publisher, something I had dreamed of as a student. At first it was just small drafts, character descriptions. Then one day I wrote my own story, about a little fox who got lost from his pack, but eventually found his own forest. I wrote it with all my heart, and I called it Not a Problem. The book was published. I didn't expect much, but then the thank you notes from parents, the hand-drawn drawings from young readers moved me to tears. One afternoon, while waiting in line at a small bookstore in downtown Portland, a little girl of about 8 turned around, her eyes shining. "You wrote this? I love it." I burst out laughing, surprised to the point of choking. In that moment, I was no longer the Avery Johnson who had sat face down in the bathroom because of betrayal. I was a woman who was truly living. By what she loved, by her own strength. I learned to cook, not to make someone say it was delicious, but to make myself happy. I learned to grow vegetables, and the first time I picked a small tomato, I cried like a child. I learned to smile at myself in the mirror, and saw that smile was universal. I no longer needed anyone to validate me, because I had rewritten the chapter of my life that I deserved. I am no longer a woman who begs for love from others. I am a woman who I am proud of, and if someone ever underestimates me, they don't deserve me in the first place. My story is not unique, but if you have ever felt small in your own life, trust me, you are not alone, and you can absolutely start over, from anywhere, anytime, as long as you dare to choose yourself. If you see yourself somewhere in this story, leave a comment. Tell me about your journey. I read every word. And if you want to continue to accompany the healing, rebirth, and inspiration stories, don't forget to follow the BS-FamiFiles channel. Because here, we don't tell perfect stories. We tell real stories.